Who is Martin Luther King? A lot of people have been influenced by this life, and a lot of people refer back to Martin Luther King as the person who led the civil rights movement in the early 60s. He started his leadership as in the civil rights movement in Albany, Georgia, when he was 25 years old, and he was dead by 39. Even if it was only 14 years, it was a great life of accomplishment in leading this country toward a more equitable state. The event in the United States was so profound, the whole world was paying attention. To take on the mantle of leading that requires, I think, a grounding in something more than yourself, a grounding in knowing who you are as a human being, to be able to bring your own confidence and education and background to it. Yes, it takes that, but it also takes a grounding in the universality, the oneness, the wholeness, we're in this together experience. And so part of what I hope we can do on a day that celebrates the man that was able to bring down some of the barriers between two big groups, the white and the black, and bring us together on a common understanding that everybody has inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that we really are brothers and sisters and not enemies. We celebrate Martin Luther King for his ability to take us toward that goal. And so while we celebrate that, let's be clear that those who appear to be on the other side probably in their heart want the same thing we want: to be loved, to be respected, to have a legacy, to be able to have freedom, to act with confidence in this world. Two ways of working in this world. One is through force. And every time you have a force, you have a countervailing force. Every time you push, something pushes back. That's force. It's making it has to be a certain way. It has to be my way. It has to be done with speed. It has to be done according to the way I've set it out. That's force. Power, on the other hand. Power is the ability to essentially invoke what you want from the world by the way you are being. It is a higher state of consciousness where you allow, where you invite, where you love instead of criticize, where you are accepting rather than critical. What King did was he pushed very hard, but he allowed people to come into the realization without harming them, without shaming them, without condemning them. Allow them to come into a position where they could join with, or at least lower their opposition to. Now, it wasn't beyond him to call someone out, to say, you're the one who's doing this, and you're the problem and not me. But when it came to taking blows, he took the blows and did not strike back. And this very act was pivotal to winning the hearts and minds of the country, where everybody got to see where the moral high ground was. And from that place of recognizing that the moral high ground is not in suppressing people, but in allowing, in the freedom of people, in respecting people. If we can shift from the animal nature within us toward our higher states of awareness, we become more powerful, more able to influence the world, more responsible, and therefore we have a greater influence than we would if we were in our animal nature. We may feel like we have power, but we have far less than when we have risen into the state of community, into a state of cooperation, into a place where we, instead of holding against something, we are for something. When we have moved to there, we are gaining the power and more influence. And once we move to the level of love instead of thought, we're even higher. We have more capacity. We have more natural influence in the world around us. And the world no longer is a place of black and white and opposition. It becomes a place of love and universality. And they meditate or pray or do affirmations or just hold a high thought for a period of time. It begins to shift our individual consciousness toward that higher way. And hopefully, as we develop compassion and love, we will find that we are beginning to move from our territoriality toward this universality, from being an animal brain to being a spiritual brain, from being from force to power, from controlling to influencing, from separate to together. So I hope we will take all the tools that we learned on our spiritual exploration that allows us to deepen into our spirituality, to develop compassion, to develop intention, to be willing to open and receive the gifts of the divine, which are often subtle, but so precious. As we struggled for a greater sense of inclusiveness, we do it not from a place of force, but we do it from a place of power, where acceptance, where the higher qualities of compassion, of love, and of knowing our oneness becomes the dominant experience in this country, where everyone feels as though they belong and life is good.